Welcome to our daily reflection for this Monday, April 14th, the Monday of Holy Week. And here we hear a prophecy right from the beginning from Isaiah 42 about the Lord's chosen and anointed servant who will be called to victory and to be a covenant to the nations and bring light. And of course, we see the fulfillment of that in Jesus Christ. And everything he does, and especially in his death, will usher in the new covenant, and he will be a light to the world. And so we see that fulfillment of that prophecy in Jesus himself. And then we have the Psalm 27, about not being afraid of enemies. And then it gives two key words for God's servants that who suffer from persecution and from enemies. And it's to wait for the Lord and to have courage. And Jesus will embody that. He will wait and trust upon the Lord, and he will have courage in the face of his enemies, even as they put him to death. He will wait, and the Lord will raise him up. And Jesus has courage. And so we are invited to imitate Jesus with waiting and patience and courage. And that's what it takes to follow Jesus in the world today. Courage. And then we have the gospel story, which talks about days before the Passover. There's a feast that Mary and Martha have for their brother Lazarus, as to celebrate that Jesus has healed him. And Mary takes a liter of costly perfume and ointment, aromatic nard, and breaks it open and pours it upon Jesus. And she anoints his feet. And then that fragrance fills the house. Of course, this will be a sign of burial for Jesus. She's actually preparing him for burial. And that's rather striking. But then someone complains that this is a waste, pouring all this expensive nard, which was 300 days' wages. It could have been given to the poor, and this was a waste. Why give it and pour it out like this extravagantly to Jesus when it could have been given to the poor? And of course, giving to the poor is always a good thing. But there's two commandments: love of God, and then number 2 is love of neighbor. And sometimes people say, well, why give money to a church? Why does the church spend money and lavish money on a beautiful cathedral or a church when it should be given to the poor? Well, remember who complains about money being wasted that should have been given to the poor? It was Judas, the one who betrays Jesus. And John tells us it's not because he really cared about the poor. He had his own personal agenda. And oftentimes people will critique the church for spending money, wasting money on the church when it could have been given to the poor. And they might have a hidden agenda like Judas, or maybe they don't understand that it's the fulfillment of the first commandment, to love God, is what we're called to do, and worship him. And so when the church builds beautiful churches and gives precious gold or silver for the chalice and the paten and for beautiful art to adorn a church, it's because we are called first and foremost to love God. And by doing that, people who make a sacrifice and give donations for a church, they're doing it for Christ, to give him honor and glory and worship. In other words, we've received all good things from God and we give back to him. And that is worthy of justice. And that's fine to do. But we also have a second commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. And so we're also called to take care of the poor. And Jesus says, you'll always have the poor with you. And in other words, of course you're always going to take care of the poor, but you will not always have me. She has done a beautiful thing for me, right? Do not trouble her. And so Jesus gives us that beautiful principle here of loving God and giving glory to God, and also loving our neighbor, especially our poor neighbor. So we are to love the poor, but we're also to love God. And love of God is first and foremost. But here's the secret. As Mother Teresa of Calcutta loved this passage, she would invite people to do something beautiful for the Lord in giving to the poor. And she was quoting this very passage. And she saw that giving to the poor was giving to Jesus. And so that's a beautiful thing. But Mother also believed that giving to the church was, and giving God praise and worship was the first call. Her second call was to take care of the poor. But she took care of the poor because she loved Jesus. So here's the irony. If we love Jesus and worship Jesus, we'll have a heart to take care of the poor as well. It's not either or, it's both and. And that passage and Mary's extravagant gift to Jesus is a witness of love, and love of God leads to love of neighbor. There's very few who will love neighbor for the sake of neighbor. But Mother Teresa and her sisters are an example of that. They love the poor because they first and foremost love Jesus. Let us imitate them. May the Lord bless and keep you.
This daily reflection is brought to you thanks to the generous support of the Mission Circle. Join the Mission Circle to help Catholics worldwide understand, live, and share their faith. Sign up at missioncircle.org today.